everyone. Welcome to the Rec Poker Podcast. I'm the Forums edition, I should say. I'm your host, Jim Reed, Bluffsterini in the home games, and at Hold'em_Steelers on Twitter. I'd like to thank Learn Pro Poker, Website Amp, the small business community, and Running Aces Racetrack, Hotel, and Casino for their sponsorship and support of this podcast, which I have so much fun every week talking with this awesome panel of poker fans who come and join me, and we just get to chat strat, man. It's my favorite thing to do in the world. So this week I'm joined by a few, but why don't you lead us off, Chris, and tell us where we can reach you.
Yeah, I'm Chris Jones. Happy to be here. I'm 5x5 on PokerStars and Twitter.
I am John Somsky, and I am Poker Geek MN everywhere.
I'm Rob Washam, and I'm Rabman50 everywhere.
And just like every week, we're going to take a post from the Rec Poker forums and talk about it. Just like every week, we're playing against each other in the home game, trying to take chips away from each other and win one of these fancy bronze pins. And if we're lucky enough to do that, some of us might go on to win one of these coveted, elusive silver pins. Just saying, pretty rarefied company. They don't give those out to anybody. Yeah, that's right, Rob. I can see you shaking your head in the background. So,
asterisk.
Oh, there is an asterisk. That's true. It actually does have an asterisk behind it. That's a good point. Thanks, Rob. Thanks for pointing that out. I can always count on you. So this week, we're joined for a third week in a row. I think this is our last one with Kim Pet-Vet. But Kim, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks. Happy to be here. I'm Fergie56 in the home game and Pet-Vet everywhere else.
And Kim is one of our famous Canadian members, and so is the poster of this week's discussion post. This comes from Wiener85, the Twitter guru master of it all, Chad McVean. And the title of this post is Early Hand from Tonight's Tournament. So we'll just get into here. So Chad is playing in the low jack. He's got 4 of clubs, 4 of hearts. He's almost got Chris Jones's favorite hand, but he's just one rank lower. He gets called by M. Bobker as Michael Babker in the hijack, John Letzi in the cutoff, Jasper Jr. in the small blind, and we go to a flop. The flop is ace of clubs, jack of diamonds, 4 of diamonds. And so Chad has flopped bottom set on a pretty wet board. So Jasper Jr. checks out of the small blind, and Chad bets 180 into the pot of 422. So I'm just going to stop it there, and we can talk about it a bit. To me, whether I have bottom set or not, I'm going to be sizing up a little bit here on this wet dynamic board like this, because there's whether I'm bluffing or betting with one pair or betting with a set, because it's a very juicy board. You'd love to get heads up here after this street. And if I was tempted to bet very small, I think I'd be more inclined just to put that hand in my checking range and just have a different range for betting with a larger size. But what do you guys think? So again, ace of clubs, jack of diamonds, 4 of diamonds, the pot's 422. We've got bottom set. What are you making the bet there? Anyone who unmutes first, John?
Personally, I'd probably go, the smallest I would go to would be half pot. I'd probably do just slightly over half pot because the board is so wet.
Yeah, and we're going to be out of position a lot too. Yeah, Rob?
Yeah, I don't know if you need to go half pot. You could probably go quarter to a third still. The problem that you have is in your multi-way pot. You don't want to start inflating this unnecessarily. You've got a decent hand. People are going to be pretty inelastic on this kind of board. So they either have something and they're going to call or they're not. And it doesn't matter what your bet size is, I don't think, to chase away the players that don't have anything to continue with. So I would probably still stick with the smaller sizing just because it's 4-way. If it was heads up, sure, you want to get more money in the pot, but I don't know that you want to get more money in the pot with 3 other players.
I do. I definitely do. I want to get this is so just like slightly disagree because this is like a dream flop when you've got pocket 4s. I think aces are going to have a tough time folding. Diamond draws are going to have a tough time folding. Even jacks are going to have a tough time folding. And if somebody please have ace jack, let's go. So because of that, this is also a board that it's not just when I have my sets that I'm going to be betting, because this board has that sort of dynamic to it. I'm probably betting 2/3 pot on this. I'm probably betting like 300 or something on this kind of board. Because I don't mind if this pot, if we inflate it, and I feel like I can do that. Also, I'm the opener. I have a pretty uncapped range here. I can have sets of aces. I can have sets of jacks. I can have ace king. Let's have people stick around with me. Let's go.
And the ace is not the ace of diamonds, so there are a lot of ace high flush draws out there too that you could have easily from there. So when you say that you're doing that larger sizing, no matter what you're holding, that's because it's a fairly value heavy range. Like, and some of those medium strength hands that we would maybe make a smaller bet with, otherwise we're just going to check instead and maybe balance that with some check raises, some check calls. Am I reading that correctly?
That is my take. Yes.
Because I think it's interesting, the concept about just changing the size of the bet should have an effect on the range that you're employing that bet with. So that it's not always straight, the smaller the bet, the looser range. But
for instance, if I had, I am, and especially because this is 4-way multi-way, I'm betting big with the strongest value and my strongest sort of draws. But I am not betting a lot of hands. So like if I had somehow, like let's say I had king jack of hearts or something on this board, that is a clear check for me.
Yep.
What if you had ace king there? Would you be betting big?
That is probably the bottom of my continuing range, and yes, I would bet that same size.
I agree. I think on this Dynamica board, this is bound to hit a lot of the people that called range. So you really want to bet big with your draws and with your made hands.
Yep. All right. So as played, we get a call from Michael Babker and John Lutzy, who are both in position to us, and Jasper Jr. folds out of the blinds. We get to the turn. The pot is 962, and the turn is the king of clubs. So king of clubs, ace of clubs, jack of diamonds, 4 of diamonds. So the pot's 962. In a vacuum, are we continuing here? What's the sizing of our turn c-bet? What are people thinking about that? I'm inclined to continue. The king came in, which does bring a queen 10 Broadway straight. That's true. But it also makes a lot of 2-pair hands, which are going to be paying us off now, which is great. And it also introduces some 1-card straight draws for some players. They're going to have a pair plus draw now, and they're probably going to come along with some of that. And so I'm inclined to, what do we say the pot was here? 962. 2 players behind. Yeah, I still would be inclined to make certainly bigger than 1/3, I guess is what I'm saying here. More like half or even larger than half. Although I've been told that I typically make small flop bets and large turn bets, so I don't know if that's part of my own thing, but I would be inclined to size up here.
I think you can go 3/4 to a full pot here.
Yeah, nice.
The thing is the people who are on the stronger draws aren't going to fold no matter what. So you may as well get some money out of them while you're still ahead, especially now that a second flush draw came in. So there's just so much. The board is so dripping wet, and yet you still probably have the best hand most of the time here. So you want to make them pay for that river card, and you hope they call, but you want to make them pay for it.
That's a great point, because it really is. It's one of those rare situations where lots of different holdings have at least a marginal hand. Lots of different holdings have a redraw, and you aren't blocking any of them because you've got bottom set, which is the best possible place to be in from this point of view. And so it does. Yeah, I agree, John. And I think Rob said earlier that the actual ranges are going to be fairly inelastic to sizing at this point. So if you wanted to be exploitative about it, I think you could size up with your value hands and size down with your bluffs. But again, I don't think that you shouldn't have that many bluffs here, because it's hard for them to continue on the flop and not have a hand that's still going to continue on the turn here. So given that you're just by the math of your range, you're going to be strong here. So I think you don't gain anything by making a small bet, and maybe they'll discount the strength of your hand. I think you might as well just tell them, yeah, I have a strong range here. Here's a big bet. Deal with it.
Yeah, and I think we've talked many times about getting that bet in on the turn while people still have the draws, because you want to be able to get the money in when they still have an ability to call, whereas they might not be able to call on the river.
You're going to have a hard time getting a hand that you beat calling you on a river.
Exactly.
I mean, maybe you can get a 2-pair hand calling, but even that's going to be tough with this board.
And that's another great point, because odds are the river is going to be scarier than it would be for most other runouts, if you know what I mean. So like when the turn is this runout, the number of river cards that are not going to chase away your action drops significantly. So whether you actually lose, whether you get outdrawn with two players, that's possible. One of them could be drawing to a straight, one of them could be drawing to a flush. You don't get to tell which one's which, or get to choose which one sticks around in the hand. But oh God, I was going to sound so smart there, folks. I guarantee it. I don't know where it went, but oh yes. So, but even if you don't get outdrawn, the odds of a scare card coming that kill your action is something that we don't consider enough as well. And I think you're much more likely to get paid on the turn, and then maybe even get a smaller bet paid on the river, depending on how it runs out. But I think you can get a big bet on the turn here paid.
Yeah.
So as played, the pot is 962. Chad is first to act and bets 300. And I think Chad might be trying to just bet what he thinks is like a wider range there. Like I think Chad maybe is thinking, I'm going to be betting a bunch of these other hands here, so I should make this a smaller sizing. And I think in fact, you would just not be betting with those hands. So you don't need a size that fits that wide range. You're only going to be betting in these spots where you have a big size value or one of those few draws that have a lot of equity in it. And so Michael Babker and John Lutzy both call the 300, and we go to the river. The pot is 1,862 chips, and the river is the 5 of hearts, which is pretty bricky. It's hard to be brickier than the 5 of hearts given this action. And I think I can't tell exactly where the effective stacks are right now, but I feel like we're deep enough that
we started with 3,000 per hand.
Oh yeah, okay. It's this early in the
second hand.
Second hand. That's what it is. Thanks, Kim. So I would be betting. Here again. You're still going to get called by all those 2-pair hands. That's really all you're targeting at this point. I think you're targeting 2-pair hands. So I think you have to make a call you have to make a bet that's going to get paid by them. I guess I know John Lutzy, he's an aggressive player. So if I knew that if I just checked, he might try and take this away on the river, I could see checking to trap. But again, I don't know if many players are going to be bluffing. I guess if you bet, no, I don't know. I'm inclined to bet. What do you folks think?
There's a ton of hands that are going to call us that we beat. And there's very few hands out there. I would argue that basically at this point that there's maybe 2 combinations of Queen 10 that beat it. Queen of Diamonds, 10 of diamonds and queen of spades, 10 of spades are maybe the only two combos that beat us. And there's a ton of like sticky aces that are going to get sticky, or two pairs, or there's a lot of things out there that people are just not going to be able to fold to. I would be probably putting in a kind of a half pot bet, and I'm hoping somebody shoves on me, because I think I don't think I'm beat here in very often at all.
I agree.
Yeah, it does feel like there's a ton of two pair hands out there. Yeah,
Yeah,
Rob?
I think you want to bet here. I don't think a check is in order. He's bet pretty small the whole way through. Whereas I agreed on the flop, I didn't agree on the turn. I think it should have been bigger. And here I think we need to lead out. If you were beat already on the turn. This 5 didn't do anything to change that, unless somebody was sitting there with pocket 5s, which is highly unlikely.
Who plays that garbage?
Well, yeah, I don't know anybody that plays pocket 5s.
They wouldn't get this deep. Not even I would get this deep with pocket 5s.
Yeah, I don't think they get to the river.
Fair play.
Yeah, they're not going to get to the river with it, that's for sure.
Yeah, and by the way, that's a good point with the turn. Even those two combos that I just mentioned that beat us, I think we probably hear from them on the turn.
Right.
They have
With
a
the second
made
flush
straight
draw,
with
yeah.
a flush draw out there. Like
Two flush draws now.
I just don't think we're beat ever here.
That's a great point.
The only hand that might slow play there would be the queen 10 of diamonds, which is like it's one hand out of all the possible hands.
Right.
So, and if they have that, you're going to go broke. That's all there is to it.
So what we're saying is we're going to call this bet. We're going to put the last of our chips in.
Now, it is scary when the river's a brick. One person puts it's not that big a bet. The first bet's only about a little over half pot. And then you get shoved over an all in. So there is you do have to think about like what does that action mean for the range of that shover. But I still think they're doing that with like, I don't know, two pair. There's got to be some ace. Okay, well now I just spoiled it for myself, so I don't want to I just rolled down to the answer.
Absolutely, because I think that you've been sort of betting small all this time, and then you check, and they're just discounting you as having any type of a hand.
Great point.
And in their mind, they're only playing each other in this hand.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So then I would like, if I check here, I guess it's because I kind of want it. This is what we were saying earlier, where we could get that aggressive action from someone in position that might not make it otherwise.
Induce action from those aggressive players.
So what ends up happening is it goes bet, shove. Chad ends up folding. So I guess he thinks there's someone out there with the queen 10 or a bigger set. There could theoretically be a bigger set up there as well. And then they turn over ace jack and ace 5. So we were right about the two pair, and then the rivered two pair for Babker. He didn't get any luck at all. That's the worst possible card that could have come for Babker on the river there to get two pair like that. That stinks. And interesting. So John Lutzy is in the forum here, so he's writing about this hand from his point of view as well, and he says that he'd timed down. He could tell that it was a real decision that Chad had. And John says, on the river, I would have called most bets from you if you'd continued. But when you checked and Babker led large, it looked like on the river, him and I was maybe ahead of you, so we didn't put you on a set, blah, blah, blah. And figured he could get a call from Michael, which he did end up doing. And he also says that having three players in the hand changed the dynamics, and it might have changed the action on earlier streets, which is a good point. And ARW also has a great post in here. ARW does wonderful work in our forums, and so he's got a bit of a breakdown. He also thinks the flop sizing was a little too low, and He advocates going for 3 streets of value, which I think we all agree on here. And yeah, he just says that it wasn't really a value check as played on the river, which I think it kind of depends on what you're trying to get out of it. But given that we folded to the action, I think that's true.
So, if you think about it too, if in game, you're sitting there all the way and you're betting all the way and you're getting called all the way, even though the river was a brick, you see monsters under the bed. What are these people calling with? I mean, I've got a set. What are they calling with? I don't understand. So it's very easy to get caught into that mindset that, oh man, they have to have me beat. There's no way they'd be betting without having a hand that beats me.
And I think that's not a bad impulse to have when you see this kind of action. Like, that's a good thing to be thinking about. And he even says here, Chad says in the chat, if there was only one opponent in the hand, I would have called. Both seem to make their actions pretty quickly, and the raise and re-raise on the river really solidified the thought that he was losing to one of them. And that's I think what is a good thing to be thinking about. I think Chad knows what he's doing when you do see this action.
But what hands could they possibly have? You said they could have sets, but I think they probably would have 3-bet that pre-flop with even jacks, either of those players in position.
That's a good point.
So they probably don't have aces or kings unless they're really slow playing them.
Yeah, and I think, like I said, I think it's easy to lose track of that when you're in the heat of the battle like this.
Yeah.
And I think that's what happened here, because we have the luxury of sitting back here and analyzing it a little bit at a time. We're spending a half hour analyzing this one hand. He's got like 20 seconds to make a decision. It's very, very easy for us to say, oh yeah, they couldn't have anything.
No, that's a really good point though, because just by our range work, by them calling pre-flop, I think that's a great point, Kim. You can take out aces, kings, and jacks. And I think with this crowd, you can take jacks out too. And Chris made the great point earlier that with 2 flush draws on the board, that straight is going to raise the turn. So when you rule out those 3 sets and the straight, even though you see this action in front of you, I think if you had enough time to really go through and do that hand range work, you could eliminate a lot of the hands that are ahead of you. So that's well done. That's some great points, gals and gals.
And it really does. One last thing about this, when you think about these kind of hands, when you're in these type of spots, it really changes the dynamic. The order that these cards come out, it's like it really changes it. If this had come out Ace Jack King, then I think Queen 10 opens up to like a full, like the full probably almost 16 combos of Queen 10. And the straights become much more realistic. But once we're getting to a turn here, it just seems some of those Queen 10s, and that's also why I like that bigger bet.
Yes.
Because we're going to start, we're also going to start eliminating some of those, and it makes it less likely by the time we get to this river that any kind of straights are beating us. Because I don't think anybody's got 2-3 here. So I think we're only worried about Queen 10, and there just doesn't seem to be that many of them. And if they have it, okay, I lost.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And that is part of poker too. Like, you're going to get those set over sets. You're going to get those, we just had a second best hand meet a best hand. And that doesn't mean that you played it wrong. And that also doesn't mean that I should have just shoved pre and then they wouldn't have been in the hand with this garbage. That all kind of equals out in the long run. You're going to have these bad matchups every once in a while. And it's not worth adjusting your strategy to get yourself out of spots where you get beat by really good hands. That's just not something you get to do. But this was really illuminating for me from a hand ranging point of view to get through to the river and say, okay, I'm playing in this email turn-based tournament right now, and where I get 6 hours to make every decision. And I like to think that if I was in a spot like this, I would be able to take my time, go through, start putting them through a hand funnel, and then realize that most of the value hands I'm worried about actually should not be included in this hand range. So this was a really good eye-opening forum for me. All right, well, I have so much fun with these chats. So everyone, thank you so much for joining me. Whoops. Haha. And thank you also. You can't do it too smoothly. You got to get the wrong musical cue in once. But Running Aces, Racetrack Hotel and Casino, Learn Pro Poker, Website AMP, the small business community. Rob, Kim, Chris, John, thanks.